A cursed alpha king stripped of everything, a mill worker with nothing left to lose. When Elara dragged home a dying wolf wearing a collar that shouldn't exist, the entire city called her insane. They had no idea she'd just adopted the most dangerous man in the north, or that her choice would ignite a war that would burn kingdoms to ash. If you want to see how a woman everyone underestimated became the queen who changed everything, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Now let's begin. The wolves came to Greyhaven on the first night of the killing frost. Elara Vance heard them before she saw them, low howls threading through the wind like funeral songs, drifting down from the black wall of the thornwood forest that loomed over the northern edge of the city. She stood at the window of her third-floor apartment, hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug that had long since gone cold, and watched the snowfall thicken into a veil between the living world and whatever waited beyond the tree line. Greyhaven didn't believe in wolves anymore. Not the real kind, anyway. The city had spent 2 decades swallowing its own tail, choking on smoke from the textile mills and dying by degrees. The river had turned gray. The streets had turned mean. The people had turned inward, hunched against the cold and the poverty and the creeping certainty that better days were a lie their grandparents told. But Elara believed in wolves. She'd seen what they left behind. Her brother Matthias had disappeared into the Thornwood 6 winters ago, chasing some hunter's rumor about a bounty on a white stag. They'd found his rifle 3 days later, snapped cleanly in half. They'd found his coat a week after that, shredded and soaked in something that wasn't quite blood. They never found Matthias. The city had shrugged, added his name to the list of fools who'd wandered past the boundary stones, and moved on. Elara had not moved on. She finished the cold coffee in one bitter swallow, set the mug on the sill, and turned back toward the cramped kitchen where her coat hung on a nail beside the door. 4:30 in the morning. Shift started at 5. The Greymark Mill didn't care if you were tired, didn't care if you were grieving, didn't care if the wolves were singing again in the dark. The looms ran 20 hours a day, and if you weren't standing at your station when the whistle blew, someone else would be there by noon. She pulled on the coat, wool, patched at both elbows, smelling faintly of lanolin and sweat, and wrapped a thin scarf twice around her throat, her reflection caught in the window glass. A woman too young to look, this worn dark hair pulled back in a braid that had given up trying to be neat, eyes the color of smoke in winter. 24 years old, no family left, no savings, no prospects, just a job that was killing her slowly, and a city that had already forgotten her name. The walk to the mill took 15 minutes through streets slicked with ice and empty, except for the other early shift workers, gray shapes moving through the gray dawn like ghosts. No one spoke. No one made eye contact. Greyhaven had learned not to waste energy on anything that didn't keep you alive. Elara clocked in at 4:57, grabbed her goggles and gloves from the rack, and took her place at loom 42 in the third row. The machine was older than she was. A hulking beast of iron and wood that shuddered and screamed when it ran, but it was hers. She knew its rhythm. She knew which threads would snap under tension, which shuttles would jam, which petals stuck in the cold. She knew how to survive it. The whistle blew, the looms roared to life, and Elara disappeared into the noise. She adds, 12 hours. 12 hours of heat and dust and the relentless hammer of machinery that turned cotton into cloth and people into equipment. 12 hours of standing in the same square meter of floor, hands moving in patterns so automatic she didn't need to think, mind drifting into the gray nowhere that kept her sane. She thought about Matthias. She thought about the wolves. She thought about the question she'd never been able to answer. What had her brother seen in the thornwood that made him scream? The lunch whistle cut through the roar at 12:30. Elara peeled off her goggles, blinked the grit from her eyes, and joined the shuffle toward the canteen, a drafty warehouse space with long tables and a single coal stove that never quite heated the room. She had 20 minutes. She used 10 of them to eat the bread and cheese she'd wrapped that morning, 5 to wash her face in the freezing water from the pump outside, and the remaining 5 to stand in the cold and let her ears stop ringing. Vance. She turned. Gregor Lyle stood in the doorway of the canteen, a heavy-set man with a foreman's badge and the dead-eyed look of someone who'd spent 30 years watching people break. He didn't like Elara. He didn't like anyone, but he especially didn't like women who didn't laugh at his jokes or flinch when he stood too close. "What?" Elara said flatly. "Ketter's asking for you." Her stomach dropped. Osmond Ketter was the mill supervisor, the man who decided who got shifts, who got pay docked, who got fired. If he wanted to see you, it was never good. "When?" "Now." Gregor jerked his head toward the administrative building, a 2-story brick structure that crouched at the edge of the mill yard like a toad. "Better move. He doesn't like waiting." Elara shoved her hands into her pockets and crossed the yard, boots crunching through frozen gravel. The wind bit at her face. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the low moan of a train pulling out of the freight station, carrying Greyhaven's cloth to cities that still had money. Ketter's office was on the 2nd floor, a wood-paneled room that smelled of tobacco and old paper. He sat behind a desk stacked with ledgers, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of smile that made her skin crawl. "Miss Vance," he said, not looking up. "Sit." She didn't sit. "I'm on lunch. I've got 8 minutes." Ketter's smile widened. "Then I'll be brief. Your attendance has been noted as exemplary. Your productivity is adequate. Unfortunately, the mill is facing economic pressures, and we're being forced to reduce our workforce by 15%. Your position is being eliminated effective end of this week." The words hit her like cold water. "You're firing me." "Letting you go," Ketter corrected, finally meeting her eyes. "It's nothing personal. I haven't missed a shift in 2 years. And we appreciate your service. I need this job. A lot of people need jobs, Miss Vance." She felt the floor tilt beneath her. "When?" "Friday. You'll receive half pay for the remainder of the month as severance. I suggest you use the time to seek other opportunities." There were no other opportunities. The mills were shedding workers like dead skin. The docks had closed. The foundries were running skeleton crews. Greyhaven was a city circling the drain, and she'd just been pushed one step closer to the edge. "Is that all?" she managed. Ketter waved a hand. "That's all." She walked out of the office, down the stairs, and back across the yard in a kind of stunned silence. The whistle blew. The lunch break was over. Loom 42 was waiting. She went back to work because she didn't know what else to do. The shift ended at 6. Elara clocked out, turned in her goggles, and stepped into the winter night. The city had turned blue in the twilight, street lamps flickering to life in uneven rows. She walked without direction, hands numb, mind churning. No job meant no rent. No rent meant eviction. Eviction meant the shelters or the streets, and neither one was a place you survived for long. She found herself walking south, away from the mill, toward the old quarter where the buildings sagged and the alleys smelled like rot. There was a place down here she knew, a place most people avoided. The Greyhaven Animal Shelter. It wasn't official. It wasn't funded. It was a crumbling warehouse run by a woman named Iris Cade who took in the strays and ferals that animal control wouldn't touch. Dogs too sick, cats too mean, creatures too broken to be worth saving. Elara had started volunteering there 3 years ago, after Matthias vanished, because it was the only place in the city where something still tried to fight for the forgotten. She pushed open the rusted door. The smell hit her first. Wet fur, disinfectant, old hay. Then the sound, barking, whining, the low hiss of a cat somewhere in the shadows. The warehouse was divided into makeshift pens, cages stacked along the walls, each one holding something the world had given up on. "Elara." Iris appeared from the back, wiping her hands on a rag. She was 60, maybe older, with gray hair pulled into a knot and eyes that had seen too much to be shocked by anything. "Didn't expect you tonight," Iris said. "I needed to be somewhere that wasn't my apartment." Iris studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. You eat?" "Not hungry." "Liar. Go grab the bucket by the sink. Feeding time." They worked in silence, moving through the rows of cages, filling bowls with kibble and fresh water. A 3-legged terrier, a blind hound, a litter of kittens born too early, huddled together for warmth. Elara moved through the routine, letting the work quiet her mind. She was refilling the water dish for a scarred pit bull when Iris called from the far end of the warehouse. "Elara, come here." There was something in her voice, something tight and careful. Elara set down the bucket and walked to the last pen, a reinforced enclosure built for the animals too dangerous to handle safely. Iris stood in front of it, arms crossed. "Hunters brought him in this morning," she said quietly. "Found him in the thornwood, half dead. They wanted me to put him down." Elara looked into the pen and froze. The creature inside was massive, easily 100 pounds, built like a wolf but shaped wrong, too long in the limbs, too broad in the chest. His coat was black, matted with dirt and blood, ribs showing through the fur, but it was his eyes that stopped her. Amber. Bright and burning, fixed on her with an intensity that didn't belong to an animal, and around his neck, half hidden in the fur, was a collar, silver, carved with symbols she didn't recognize. "What is he?" Elara whispered. "Don't know," Iris said. "Wolf dog, maybe. Hybrid. He won't eat, won't let anyone near him. I've seen animals give up before, but this—" She shook her head. "He's waiting for something." Elara crouched slowly, bringing herself level with the creature's gaze. Those eyes. She'd seen them before. In her dreams. In the dark. In the moments before waking when she still remembered Matthias's face. "Can I go in?" "He'll tear you apart." "Can I go in?" Iris sighed, pulled a keyring from her belt, and unlocked the gate. "Your funeral." Elara stepped inside. The wolf dog didn't move, didn't snarl, didn't even shift his weight. He just watched her, sides heaving with shallow breaths, blood crusted around old wounds. She knelt on the concrete floor, close enough to touch, and spoke softly. "I don't know what you are. I don't know what happened to you, but I know what it's like to be invisible. I know what it's like to be forgotten." The creature's ears flicked forward. "I can't promise I can save you. I can't even save myself right now, but if you want to fight, I'll fight with you." She reached out slowly. The wolf dog closed his eyes and let her hand rest on his head. Something in the air shifted, something she couldn't name, like the moment before lightning strikes. Iris's voice came from behind her, low and uncertain. "Elara, what are you doing?" "I'm taking him home." "You can't afford—" "I'm taking him home." The walk back to her apartment was a blur. Iris had helped her rig a makeshift leash from rope, but the wolf dog didn't pull, didn't resist. He walked beside her through the frozen streets like a shadow, head low, eyes fixed forward. People stared. People always stared in Greyhaven when something didn't fit the script. But no one said anything. No one ever said anything. Her building was a 4-story walk-up in the factory district, walls stained with soot, plaster cracking in the stairwell. She led the creature up 3 flights, unlocked her door, and stepped inside. The apartment was small. One room that served as kitchen, bedroom, and everything else. A narrow bed, a table, a sink, a window that looked out onto an alley. It wasn't much. It was all she had. She closed the door. The wolf dog stood in the center of the room, sides still heaving, eyes scanning every corner. Elara filled a bowl with water from the tap, set it on the floor, and stepped back. He didn't move. "I don't have much food," she said quietly, "but I'll get something tomorrow. I'll figure it out." The creature's gaze shifted to her face, and for just a heartbeat she could have sworn she saw something impossible. Recognition. She sat on the edge of the bed, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. "I'm going to call you Ash," she whispered, "because you look like you walked out of a fire." Ash lowered his head and drank. The days that followed blurred into a fragile, aching routine. Elara woke before dawn, left water and what little food she could spare, and walked to the mill. Ash waited by the door until she returned. He never barked, never whined, never begged. He simply existed. A presence, a weight, a silent witness to the slow unraveling of her life. She was fired on Friday, just as Keter had promised. By Monday, she'd burned through her severance-paying rent. By Wednesday, she was eating 1 meal a day so Ash could have 2. And still, he stayed. People in the building started talking. Mrs. Tarot from the 2nd floor said the creature was dangerous, that he'd kill someone, that Elara was being reckless. Mr. Voss from across the hall said she was wasting money on an animal when she should be looking for work. Elara stopped answering her door. At night, she lay in bed and watched Ash sleep on the floor beside her, his breathing slow and steady, and wondered why she'd done this. why she'd chosen to carry one more impossible weight when she was already drowning. But every time she thought about giving up, she looked into those amber eyes and saw someone who understood. 3 weeks after she brought Ash home, the dream started. She was walking through the thornwood, snow falling in thick silence, trees rising like black pillars on every side. She could hear something ahead, a voice, low and rough, calling her name. She followed it deeper and deeper, until she reached a clearing where a man knelt in the snow, hands bound in silver chains, head bowed. He looked up. Amber eyes, scarred face, a voice like gravel and smoke. "Find me." She woke gasping, heart hammering, sheet soaked with sweat. Ash was standing beside the bed, staring at her. "It's just a dream," she whispered, but his eyes said otherwise. The breaking point came on a Thursday. Elara had spent the morning walking the industrial district, knocking on every door, filling out every application. No one was hiring. No one even pretended to care. She came home at dusk, legs aching, hope gutted, and found Ash waiting in the hallway outside her apartment. The door was open. Her landlord, a rat-faced man named Poole, stood inside, arms crossed. "Rent's 3 days late, Vance." "I know. I'll have it. You'll have it now or you're out. I just need—" And the dog goes, "Building policy. No animals." Something in her chest snapped. "His name is Ash." Poole sneered. "I don't care if his name is the King of the Damn North. He's gone or you're both gone." Ash growled. It was low, almost subsonic, but it filled the room like distant thunder. Poole took a step back. "Control that thing, or I'm calling—" "Get out." Elara's voice was quiet, steady. Poole blinked. "What?" "Get out." He stared at her for a long moment, face reddening, then turned and stormed into the hallway. "You've got till Sunday," he spat. "Then I'm changing the locks." The door slammed. Elara sank onto the bed, hands shaking. Ash walked to her side, sat, and rested his massive head on her knee. She buried her face in his fur, and for the first time in 6 years, she let herself cry. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker like dying stars, and tried to figure out what came next. There was no next. She was out of money, out of options, out of time. Ash lay beside her, eyes half closed, breathing slow. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. He shifted, lifting his head, and looked at her. And something happened. The air grew heavy. The light from the street lamp outside bent strangely, shadows deepening, and for just a heartbeat, Elara saw a man, tall, broad-shouldered, scars running down one side of his face, silver collar burning around his throat. Amber eyes locked on hers. She gasped, blinked. Ash stared back at her, unmoving. "What are you?" she breathed. He didn't answer. But deep in the frozen north, beyond the thornwood, beyond the boundary stones, something ancient stirred, and the wolves began to howl. The vision didn't fade. It burned itself into Elara's mind like a brand. The image of the man trapped inside the wolf, the silver collar cutting into his throat, those amber eyes pleading for something she couldn't name. She sat frozen by the window until the gray light of dawn bled across the sky, Ash motionless beside her, and when she finally moved, her body felt like it belonged to someone else. She had 3 days until Poole changed the locks. 3 days to find money she didn't have, a job that didn't exist, or a miracle that wouldn't come. She dressed in the dark, pulled on her coat, and looked down at Ash. "I have to go out," she said quietly. "I have to find work. Any work." He stood, shook himself once, and moved to the door. "You can't come with me. Not where I'm going." Ash didn't move. "They'll call animal control. They'll take you. Do you understand?" Those amber eyes held hers, patient and steady, and she realized with a cold jolt that he understood everything, every word, every fear, every desperate calculation running through her head. "Fine," she whispered, "but you stay close, and if anyone tries to touch you, you run." He made a sound low in his throat, not quite a growl, not quite agreement, and followed her into the hallway. The streets were still dark, the pre-dawn cold sharp enough to cut. Elara walked fast, breath misting in the air, Ash a shadow at her heels. She hit the docks first, where the freight crews loaded cargo onto the barges that still ran south to the river cities. The foreman took one look at her and shook his head. No women. Policy. I can lift as much as any man here. Policy, he repeated, already turning away. She tried the rail yard next, then the coal depot, then the laundries, the kitchens, the boarding houses that paid under the table for cleaning work. Every door closed before she finished speaking. Every face looked past her like she was already gone. By midday, she was back in the factory district, standing outside the Greymark mill, staring at the building that had taken 12 hours of her life every day for 2 years and then thrown her away like scrap. Ash sat beside her, silent. I don't know what else to do, she said aloud. A voice came from behind her. You could leave. She turned. A woman stood in the alley mouth, wrapped in a long coat the color of charcoal, hood pulled low. She was younger than Elara, maybe 20, with sharp features and eyes that glittered like broken glass. Excuse me? Greyhaven's dying, the woman said flatly. Everyone knows it. The mills are closing. The river's poison. In 5 years, this place will be a ghost town. Smart people already left. I don't have anywhere to go. Then you're not smart. Elara felt her jaw tighten. Who are you? The woman smiled, cold and thin. Someone who knows what you're carrying. Ash growled. The sound was deep, primal, and the woman's smile faltered just slightly. Easy, she murmured, raising one hand. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to warn you. Warn me about what? About him. The woman nodded toward Ash. You think he's a dog. You think you saved some poor stray from the woods. You have no idea what you brought into your home. Elara stepped between them, hands balling into fists. I don't know you. I don't know what you want. But you need to leave. Now. The woman studied her for a long moment, something almost like pity flickering across her face. You'll understand soon enough, she said quietly. When the hunters come. When the blood starts. When you realize the collar he wears isn't a leash, it's a prison. She turned and walked into the shadows. Elara stood there, heart hammering, until Ash nudged her hand with his nose. What did she mean? Elara whispered. He didn't answer. He never did. That night, Elara counted the money she had left. 18 marks. Enough for 4 days of food, if she stretched it. Not enough for rent. Not enough for anything that mattered. She sat on the floor with Ash's head resting in her lap, running her fingers through his matted fur, and tried to think. The woman's words circled in her mind like vultures. When the hunters come. When the blood starts. The collar he wears isn't a leash, it's a prison. Who are you? She asked softly, looking down into those impossible amber eyes. What are you running from? Ash exhaled slowly, and for just a moment she felt the weight of something immense pressing down on the room. Grief, rage, loneliness, so vast it made her chest ache. I'm not going to let them take you, she said. I don't care what you are. I don't care what you've done. You're mine now. The words felt strange in her mouth, too big, too certain. But once she said them, she knew they were true. Ash closed his eyes. And somewhere deep in the frozen north, a throne sat empty. Sunday came too fast. Elara woke to pounding on the door, Poole's voice rasping through the wood. Time's up, Vance. Open up or I'm coming in. She pulled on her coat, stood, and opened the door before he could break it down. Poole stood in the hallway with 2 men she didn't recognize, thick-necked, heavy-handed types who got paid to throw people into the street. Rent, Poole said, holding out one hand. I don't have it. Then you're out. Both of you. Ash stepped into view and the 2 men shifted their weight, hands moving toward the clubs hanging from their belts. Call off the dog, one of them muttered. He's not doing anything. Call him off, or we will. Elara's pulse spiked. You're not touching him. Poole sneered. You don't got a choice, girl. This is my building, my rules. And I say, Ash moved. It wasn't a leap, wasn't an attack. He simply stepped forward, placed himself between Elara and the men, and let out a sound that made the walls vibrate. It was the sound of something ancient and furious remembering what it used to be. The 2 enforcers backed up fast, hands white-knuckled on their clubs. Poole's face went pale. I'll call the city guard, he stammered. I'll have that thing put down. Try it, Elara said quietly. The words surprised her, the certainty in them, the cold, steady rage that came from somewhere deeper than fear. Poole stared at her, then at Ash, then turned and fled down the stairs, the two men scrambling after him. The hallway went silent. Elara's hands were shaking. "We can't stay here," she whispered. Ash looked up at her, and she saw the answer in his eyes. "I know." She packed in 10 minutes. Everything she owned fit into a canvas rucksack, 2 changes of clothes, a blanket, the photograph of Matthias she kept wrapped in cloth, and the 18 marks that wouldn't save her. She left the key on the table, took one last look at the room that had been her entire world, and walked out. Ash followed. The streets were full of Sunday market crowds, people bundled against the cold, haggling over fish and turnips and bootleg coal. No one looked at her. No one cared. She was just another body in a city full of people trying not to drown. She walked south toward the river, where the old district sagged into the floodplain and the buildings were held together with tar and prayer. There were squats down here, places where the desperate gathered when they ran out of options. She'd never thought she'd end up in one. She thought a lot of things would never happen. The squat she found was a gutted factory, windows broken, roof half collapsed. Inside, people huddled around trash fires, wrapped in rags, eyes hollow. A few looked up when she entered. Most didn't. She found a corner away from the others, spread her blanket on the concrete, and sat down. Ash curled up beside her, body pressed against hers, radiating warmth. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." He licked her hand once, gently, and closed his eyes. Elara pulled the blanket around them both and tried not to think about tomorrow. The dreams came harder that night. She was in the thornwood again, but this time she wasn't alone. The man was walking beside her, tall and broad-shouldered, moving through the trees like he'd been born to them. He didn't speak, but she could feel his presence like heat from a fire. They reached the clearing. The silver chains were gone, but the collar remained, burning against his throat. He turned to her, and his voice was rough, broken. "You have to break it." "I don't know how." "You will. When the time comes, you'll know." "Who are you?" He smiled, sad and distant. Someone who forgot what it meant to be chosen. She woke to Ash standing over her, ears pricked, body tense. Someone was in the factory. Elara sat up slowly, heart pounding, and peered through the darkness. 3 figures moved between the trash fires, silhouettes backlit by flame. They were dressed in long coats, hoods pulled low, and they moved with the kind of precision that said they weren't here by accident. One of them stopped, head turning toward Elara's corner, and spoke in a voice like gravel. "There," Ash snarled. The figure raised one hand and something silver glinted in the firelight. A blade. Elara scrambled to her feet, grabbing her rucksack, but the figures were already moving, spreading out to cut off the exits. "Run," she hissed at Ash. He didn't run. He stepped in front of her, hackles raised, teeth bared, and the growl that came from his throat wasn't the sound of a dog. It was the sound of a king. The lead figure stopped, tilted their head, and spoke again. "Kaelin Thorne, the cursed Alpha, still alive after all this time." Elara's blood went cold. "What?" The figure pulled back their hood. It was the woman from the alley, sharp features, glittering eyes. And now, in the firelight, Elara could see the scars running down one side of her face, old burns, puckered and white. "My name is Seren," the woman said quietly, "and I'm here to kill the wolf who destroyed my clan." Ash lunged. The attack was so fast, Elara didn't see it happen. One moment he was standing, the next he was airborne, jaws snapping towards Seren's throat. But Seren moved like water, twisting aside, and the blade in her hand flashed up, silver. It caught Ash across the shoulder, and he hit the ground hard, blood streaking the concrete. "No!" Elara screamed. She didn't think, didn't plan. She grabbed a piece of broken rebar from the rubble and swung it at Seren's head. The woman ducked, spun, and backhanded Elara across the face. The world went white. Elara hit the floor, tasting blood, vision swimming. She could hear Ash fighting, snarling, snapping, the wet sound of claws on flesh, but her body wouldn't move. Seren stood over her, blade raised. "You should have left him to die," she said softly. "Now you die with him." The blade came down and stopped. Ash had Seren's wrist in his jaws, bone grinding, blood pouring. She screamed, dropped the knife, and staggered back. The other 2 figures rushed forward, weapons drawn, but Ash was already moving, a blur of black fur and fury. He took the first one down with a leap that crushed ribs. The second swung a club that caught him across the skull, and he went down hard, legs buckling. Elara forced herself up, grabbed the fallen knife, and drove it into the second figure's thigh. They howled and collapsed. Seren was on her feet again, clutching her mangled wrist, eyes blazing. "This isn't over," she spat. "Darius is coming, the usurper king, and when he finds you, he'll burn this city to the ground just to watch Kaelin die." She turned and ran, the two wounded figures limping after her. Elara dropped the knife and crawled to Ash. He was still breathing, but barely. Blood matted his fur. The wound on his shoulder was deep, bone showing through. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." His eyes opened, amber, burning, and for the first time she heard his voice. Not out loud, in her mind, rough, broken, desperate. "Trust me." "What?" The collar. "Break it." "I don't." "Trust me." She looked down at the silver band around his neck, half hidden in blood and fur. The runes carved into it glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Her hands moved before her mind caught up. She gripped the collar. It burned. The metal seared her palms, heat like molten iron, but she didn't let go. She pulled, twisted, screamed through clenched teeth, and felt something inside the collar crack. Light exploded through the factory, blinding, white, pure. Elara was thrown backward, hitting the wall hard, and when she opened her eyes, the world had changed. Ash was gone. In his place stood a man, tall, scarred, bare-chested and shaking, silver collar hanging broken around his neck. His hair was black, wild, falling past his shoulders. His eyes were the same amber fire, but now they burned in a human face. He looked at her and spoke in a voice that made the air vibrate. "You freed me." Elara couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare at the impossible thing kneeling in the rubble. "Who are you?" she whispered. He rose to his full height, easily 6.5 feet, body corded with muscle and covered in scars, and the weight of his presence filled the room like a storm. "My name is Kaelin Thorne," he said quietly, "Alpha King of the Northern Clans. And you, Elara Vance, just became the most dangerous woman in Greyhaven." Outside, in the frozen dark, wolves began to howl, and the hunt began. The howling didn't stop. It rolled across Greyhaven like thunder, pouring down from the thornwood in waves that made windows rattle and dogs cower in their yards. People stumbled from their homes, faces pale in the streetlight, staring north toward the black wall of forest that suddenly felt too close, too alive, too aware. Elara pressed her back against the factory wall, lungs burning, vision still swimming from the explosion of light. Her hands throbbed where the collar had burned them, skin blistered and raw. But the pain was distant, unimportant, because the man standing in front of her, the creature she'd called Ash, the wolf she'd carried home and fed and protected, was speaking. And his voice shook the air like a landslide. "We need to move," Kaelin said, already scanning the broken windows, the gaps in the walls, calculating exits with the cold precision of someone who'd spent a lifetime being hunted. "Seren won't stop. She'll bring reinforcements. Darius will know I'm free within the hour." Elara couldn't make her mouth work. She stared at him, at the impossible architecture of him, all brutal angles and coiled strength, scars layered over scars like a map of violence survived. The silver collar hung in pieces around his neck, still smoking faintly, and his amber eyes burned with something between relief and rage. "You're not real," she whispered. He turned to face her fully, and the weight of his attention was like standing too close to a fire. "I'm real. I'm standing here because you chose to see me when no one else did, and now they're coming to kill us both for it." "Who's Darius?" "My cousin, the man who put this collar on me 3 years ago and left me to rot in the woods like an animal." Kaelin's voice went flat, dead. "The man who sits on my throne and calls himself king." The howling intensified, closer now, and Elara heard something new beneath it, voices, human voices, shouting orders in the distance. Kaelin grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the back of the factory. "Can you run?" Yes. Then run!" They burst through a gap in the wall and into the frozen night. The air bit at Elara's face, sharp and clean after the smoke-choked interior. Her legs moved on instinct, boots pounding over broken pavement. Kaylin's hand locked around her wrists like iron. Behind them, the factory erupted. Not fire, not explosion. Wolves. They poured through the openings like floodwater. Massive shapes, far larger than any natural wolf, eyes glowing in the dark. Elara caught a glimpse of Seren among them, no longer human, body twisted into something between woman and beast, muzzle stained with blood. "They're shifters," Kaylin snarled, dragging Elara around a corner. "Northern clan. Darius sent them to finish what he started." "How many?" "Too many." They ran through alleys that stank of rot and desperation, vaulting over trash piles, sliding on ice. Alara's lungs screamed, her vision blurred at the edges. But Kaylin didn't slow, didn't hesitate, and his grip on her wrists never loosened. A wolf hit the wall beside them, claws screeching on brick. Kaylin spun, released Alara's wrist, and drove his fist into the creature's skull with a crack like breaking stone. The wolf went down hard, twitching, and Kaylin was already moving again. "How are you doing that?" Elara gasped. "You're human." "I'm not human," he said simply. "I never was." They broke out onto a wider street, and Kaylin pulled her left toward the industrial quarter where the old smelting plants rose like iron cathedrals. The howling was everywhere now, echoing off buildings, impossible to locate. Elara's foot caught on a patch of ice. She went down hard, hands slamming into frozen gravel, pain shooting up her wrists. Kaylin hauled her upright without breaking stride, but the stumble cost them seconds they didn't have. A wolf landed in front of them, blocking the path. This one was bigger than the others, gray and silver, lips peeled back to show teeth like daggers. It moved with the deliberate confidence of something that knew it had already won. Kaylin stepped in front of Elara. "Kael," the wolf said. Its voice was rough, distorted by the shape of its mouth, but unmistakably human underneath. Kaylin went very still. "Thane." 3 years, the wolf continued, circling slowly. 3 years we thought you were dead. Starved in the woods, broken by the curse. And here you are, walking around on 2 legs again. How'd you manage it? None of your business. It's very much my business. Darius promised me your northern territories if I brought him your head. Imagine my disappointment when there was no head to bring. You always were easy to buy, Thane." The wolf snarled, hackles rising. "I'm loyal to the throne, not to a dead king." "Then you're going to be disappointed twice." Kaylin moved. He was fast, faster than Elara's eyes could track, closing the distance and driving his knee into the wolf's ribs before it could react. Bone cracked. The wolf yelped and twisted, jaws snapping toward Kaylin's throat. But he caught it by the scruff and slammed it into the pavement hard enough to leave a crater. The wolf didn't get up. Kaylin straightened, breathing hard, blood running from a gash on his forearm. "More coming," he said. "We need height. Somewhere defensible." "There," Elara pointed. The old grain tower loomed at the edge of the industrial zone, 10 stories of crumbling brick and rusted iron. It had been abandoned for years, condemned after the floor collapsed and killed 2 squatters. Kaylin looked at it, nodded once, and ran. The tower door was chained shut, but Kaylin tore the links apart with his bare hands, metal shrieking in protest. They climbed the interior stairs 3 at a time, Elara's legs burning, Kaylin moving like gravity didn't apply to him. They reached the top floor, a wide open space with glassless windows looking out over the city. Wind howled through the gaps. Below, Greyhaven sprawled in the darkness, lights flickering like dying embers. And surrounding the tower, gathering in the streets, were wolves, dozens of them, maybe more. Elara's heart dropped into her stomach. "We're trapped." "Yes." "That's all you have to say?" Kaylin moved to the northern window, eyes scanning the forest beyond the city limits. "They won't come up," he said quietly. "Not yet. They're waiting for orders. Darius wants to see me broken before I die. He'll come himself." "And then what?" "Then I kill him. Or he kills me. There's no third option." Elara crossed the room, grabbed his shoulder, and forced him to look at her. "That's insane. You just got free. You can barely stand. And you want to fight an army?" "I don't want to," Kaylin said, and something in his voice cracked. "But I don't have a choice. Darius won't stop. He'll tear this city apart looking for me. He'll kill everyone who helped me, everyone who saw me, everyone who might remember I existed, including you. Then we run. We leave Greyhaven. We go south. He'll follow. He'll always follow. The only way this ends is if one of us is dead. Elara opened her mouth to argue, but the words died in her throat. Because she could see it in his eyes, the weight of 3 years spent as an animal, voiceless and powerless, watching the world move on without him. The rage, the grief, the absolute certainty that he had nothing left to lose. "You want to die," she whispered. Kaelin looked away. "I want it to be over." Something fierce and stubborn rose in Elara's chest. The same thing that had made her drag a dying wolf home when she could barely feed herself, the same thing that had made her stand between Ash and the men who wanted to hurt him. "No," she said flatly. "Elara, no, you don't get to give up. Not after I burned my hands off breaking that collar. Not after I lost everything keeping you alive. You're going to fight, and you're going to win, and you're going to take back whatever they stole from you." Kaelin stared at her, something like wonder crossing his scarred face. "Why?" "Because someone has to." Before he could respond, a voice rang out from the street below, clear, cold, dripping with amusement. "Kaelin Thorne! The prodigal king returns!" Kaelin's entire body went rigid. Elara moved to the window and looked down. A man stood in the center of the street, surrounded by wolves. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with silver-streaked black hair and a face that might have been handsome if not for the cruelty etched into every line. He wore a long coat lined with fur, and at his throat glinted a medallion shaped like a wolf's head. "Darius," Kaelin said, his voice barely above a whisper. Darius smiled up at the tower. 3 years, cousin. 3 years I've ruled the northern clans. 3 years of peace and prosperity while you rotted in the woods. And now you crawl back to civilization wearing your curse like a coat and dragging some human woman behind you. How far the mighty have fallen." Kaelin gripped the window frame hard enough to crack the stone. "I'm going to rip out your throat." "I doubt that. You're weak, broken, and whatever pathetic magic let you shift back won't last. The curse is still in you, Kael. I can smell it from here." "Then come up and test it." Darius laughed, the sound echoing off the buildings. "Oh, I intend to, but first I want you to watch something." He turned and gestured. 2 wolves dragged a struggling figure into the light. Elara's blood turned to ice. It was Iris, the old woman from the shelter, hands bound, face bruised, eyes wide with terror. "No," Elara breathed. Darius grabbed Iris by the hair and forced her to her knees. "This woman harbored you when you were an animal," he called up to the tower. "She gave you shelter, fed you, kept you alive long enough to be found. That makes her a traitor to the natural order." "Let her go!" Elara screamed. "She didn't know." "Ignorance is not innocence," Darius said pleasantly. He drew a knife from his belt, silver blade gleaming. "Kaelin, you have a choice. Come down here, kneel, and accept your execution, or I open this woman's throat and move on to the next human who helped you. Then the next. Then the next. I'll burn Greyhaven to bedrock if I have to." Kaelin's breathing had gone ragged, his hands shaking. "Don't," Elara said urgently. "It's a trap. He'll kill you both." "I know. Then don't go down there." "I have to." He turned toward the stairs. Elara grabbed his arm, nails digging into scarred skin. "There has to be another way." Kaelin looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the truth he'd been carrying since the moment the collar broke. "There isn't. I'm sorry." He pulled free and started down the stairs. Elara stood frozen, mind racing, heart hammering. Below, Darius pressed the knife against Iris's throat. 10 seconds, cousin!" Elara looked around the empty room, desperate, searching for anything. Her eyes landed on the rucksack she'd dropped when they climbed the tower. Inside it, wrapped in cloth, was the broken silver collar. An idea bloomed, terrible and impossible. She grabbed the collar pieces, ignoring the pain as they burned her hands again, and ran to the window. "Darius?" she shouted. He looked up, irritated. "What?" She held up the collar, letting the silver catch the light. "You want Kaelin broken? You want him powerless? This is what kept him caged for 3 years, and I'm the only one who knows how it works." Darius's eyes narrowed. "What are you offering?" "A trade. Me for her. You let Iris go, and I'll tell you how to remake the curse. How to bind him again, forever this time. Elara, no! Kaelin's voice came from somewhere below, furious and desperate. She ignored him. Do we have a deal? Darius studied her for a long moment, then smiled slowly. We have a deal. He released Iris, shoving her toward the shadows. The old woman stumbled, caught herself, and ran. Elara descended the tower stairs on shaking legs, clutching the broken collar. Kaelin met her halfway, eyes blazing. What are you doing? Saving your life. He's going to kill you. Maybe. Or maybe I'm going to kill him. She pressed the collar pieces into his hands. Trust me. She didn't wait for his response. She walked out into the street. Darius stood waiting, surrounded by his wolves, knife still in hand. Up close he was even more intimidating, taller than Kaelin, heavier, with the casual confidence of a man who'd never lost a fight. Closer, he said. Elara stopped 3 feet away. The woman is gone. Gone. Now tell me how the curse works. Elara met his eyes, cold and calculating, and lied with every ounce of conviction she possessed. The collar doesn't just bind the shift, it binds the soul. You need 3 things to make it permanent. Silver from a bloodline forge, a binding rune carved during the dark moon, and a sacrifice. What kind of sacrifice? The blood of someone who loves the cursed freely, someone who chose them. Darius's smile widened. You. Me. He moved fast, grabbing her throat, lifting her off the ground. Elara's vision sparked, lungs screaming, but she forced herself to stay calm. You'd die for him? Darius hissed. For a broken king you've known for 3 weeks? Yes, she choked out. How touching. He raised the knife, and Kaelin exploded from the tower entrance. He hit Darius like a landslide, breaking the grip on Elara's throat, driving them both into the pavement. The wolves surged forward, but Kaelin was already moving, faster than before, stronger, something fundamental shifting in the air around him. Elara scrambled back, gasping, and saw why. The broken collar pieces in Kaelin's hands were glowing, not with silver light, with gold. You lied, Darius snarled, shoving Kaelin off and rolling to his feet. The collar can't be remade. No, Elara said, voice raw. But it can be reversed. Well, Kaelin stood slowly, and his eyes were no longer just amber. They were burning, molten, ancient. The curse didn't bind me, he said quietly. It suppressed me. And she just broke the last chain. The transformation happened in an instant. Kaelin's human shape erupted into something massive, primal, terrifying, a wolf the size of a bear, coat black as midnight, eyes like suns. Power radiated from him in waves that made the air shimmer. The Alpha King, restored. Darius shifted in response. His own wolf form barely smaller, silver and scarred, teeth bared in a rictus of hate. You think this changes anything? Darius snarled. You're still weak, still broken, still. Kaelin lunged. The fight was brutal, savage, nothing like the skirmishes Elara had seen before. These were not animals. They were forces of nature, tearing at each other, with claws that shattered stone, jaws that crushed bone, strength that bent reality. Blood sprayed across the frozen street. Buildings shook. And Elara realized with cold certainty that whoever lost this fight wouldn't walk away. The wolves surrounding them didn't interfere. This was a challenge for dominance, sacred and absolute. They watched with burning eyes as their 2 kings tried to kill each other. Darius got his jaws around Kaelin's throat. Kaelin twisted, broke free, and drove his claws into Darius's ribs. They broke apart, circling, both bleeding heavily. You were always stronger, Darius panted. But strength isn't everything. I have the clans. I have the throne. I have legitimacy. You have nothing, Kaelin said. You stole a crown from a corpse and called yourself king. But I'm not dead. And I'm taking it back. He attacked again, and this time he didn't stop. The final exchange lasted seconds. Kaelin caught Darius by the throat, lifted him off the ground, and slammed him into the pavement hard enough to crack it like glass. Darius struggled, claws raking, but Kaelin's jaws closed around his cousin's throat and held. Yield, Kaelin growled. Darius's eyes blazed with defiance. Never. Then die. Wait. The voice came from the edge of the circle. An old wolf, gray and grizzled, stepped forward. He carried himself with the weight of authority, and the other wolves shifted to let him pass. Enough, the old wolf said. This challenge is concluded. Kaelin Thorne has won by dominance and blood right. Darius Thorne, you are defeated. Do you accept exile, or do you choose death? Darius's body went limp. Exile, he whispered. Kaelin held him for one more heartbeat, then released him. Darius collapsed, coughing, human form rippling back into place. He looked small, suddenly, broken. You have until dawn, Kaelin said, his own shape returning to human. After that, if I see you in the north, I'll kill you. Darius staggered to his feet, blood pouring from the wounds in his throat, and stumbled into the darkness. The wolves watched him go. Then, one by one, they turned to Kaelin and knelt. Elara's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the frozen street, shaking, unable to process what she'd just witnessed. Kaelin crossed to her, still bleeding, still half broken, and dropped to one knee. You saved my life, he said quietly. Again. I lied about the collar. I know. It was brilliant. I could have gotten us both killed. You didn't. She looked up at him, this impossible man who'd been a wolf and a king and a broken thing she'd carried home, and felt something shift in her chest. What happens now? Kaelin glanced at the assembled wolves, then back at her. Now we go north. I take back my throne. And you? He hesitated. You come with me, if you want. Why would I want that? He reached out slowly and took her burned hand in his. The touch sent lightning up her arm. Because when you broke that collar, you didn't just free me. You bound us. The magic recognized what you did, chose me when I was powerless, loved me when I was nothing. In my world, that makes you my mate, my equal, my queen. Elara stared at him. I'm not a queen. You are now. Before she could argue, the old wolf who'd stopped the fight stepped forward and shifted into an elderly man with silver hair and sharp eyes. Your Majesty, he said to Kaelin, the Thornwood throne has been empty too long. The clans are waiting. Kaelin stood, pulling Elara with him. Then let's go home. The wolves howled in response, and the sound carried all the way to the frozen halls of the northern mountains, where an empty throne sat waiting for its king to return. The journey north began at dawn. Elara had never left Greyhaven. In 24 years of life, the farthest she'd traveled was the eastern docks, 6 miles down the river where the fishing boats came in. The world beyond the city limits was a blank space on her mental map, filled with stories that sounded like lies, mountains that touched the sky, forests older than kingdoms, wolves that walked like men. Now she was walking into that blank space with 50 of those wolves at her back. They moved in formation through the pre-dawn cold, Kaelin at the front, the old wolf, whose name was Gareth, at his right, and Elara just behind, wrapped in a borrowed fur cloak that smelled like pine and smoke. The other wolves ranged out in loose ranks, some in human form, most shifted, their breath misting in the frozen air. No one had questioned her presence. No one had asked why a human millworker was walking beside their king, but she could feel their eyes on her, measuring, judging, waiting to see if she'd break. Kaelin walked like the ground belonged to him, shoulders straight despite the wounds still healing across his ribs and back. He'd refused treatment, waved off the healer who'd tried to approach, and instead spent the night sitting watch over Greyhaven from the grain tower roof while Elara slept in fitful bursts against the wall. When she'd woken, he'd been staring north toward the Thornwood, and the expression on his face had been something between hunger and dread. Now as they crossed the boundary stones that marked the edge of human territory, that expression deepened. How far? Elara asked quietly. Kaelin didn't look at her. 3 days on foot. 2 if we push hard. And when we get there? I take back what's mine. His voice had gone flat, emotionless, and she recognized the tone. It was the same one she'd used after Matthias died, when people asked her how she was doing and she said fine because the truth was too heavy to carry in conversation. You're afraid, she said. That got his attention. He glanced at her, amber eyes sharp. What makes you think that? You've been silent since we left. You won't look at anyone, and your hands haven't stopped shaking. Kaelin looked down at his hands, flexed them once, then shoved them into his pockets. I was gone for 3 years, he said quietly. 3 years while Darius sat on my throne, made my decisions, ruled my people. They might not want me back. They might prefer the devil they know to the ghost who crawled out of the forest. You won the challenge. You beat him in front of everyone. Dominance isn't loyalty. I have to earn that. You will. How do you know? Elara thought about the weeks Ash had spent waiting outside the mill, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only thing in the world worth protecting, the absolute certainty in his eyes when he'd told her she was his mate. Because you're the kind of person who fights for what matters, she said, even when it costs everything. People follow that. Kaelin was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her hand. The touch was brief, careful, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he held too tight. But when he pulled away, something in his expression had softened. "Thank you," he said. Gareth dropped back to walk beside them, his silver hair pulled into a warrior's braid, scars visible on his weathered face. "Your Majesty," he said formally, "we need to discuss what happens when we reach Thornhall." "I know. Darius left supporters behind. The Council won't accept your return without proof of legitimacy." "I have proof. I'm alive. I won the challenge." "You were declared dead 3 years ago. Darius held a funeral, burned an effigy. The clans mourned you. To them, you're a revenant." Kaelin's jaw tightened. "Then I'll prove I'm real." "How?" "The old way. Trial by stone." Gareth's expression darkened. "No one survived the stone trial in 50 years. I will." "Kaelin, I don't have a choice, Gareth. If I don't prove myself by their laws, they'll never accept me. And if they don't accept me, everything I've fought for dies in that throne room." The old wolf sighed, looked at Elara, then back at Kaelin. "She can't be there." Alara's head snapped up. "Excuse me?" "The trial takes place in the sacred chamber," Gareth said, not unkindly. "Humans aren't permitted. It's ancient law." "I'm his mate," Elara said flatly. "That makes me human," Gareth finished. "The law doesn't bend for bonds, girl, not even royal ones." Kaelin stopped walking. The entire column stopped with him. "The law," he said quietly, dangerously, "is mine to interpret, and I say she stays with me." "Your Majesty, would you like to challenge me for the right, Gareth?" The old wolf held his gaze for a long beat, then lowered his eyes. "No, sire." "Good. Then we're settled." He started walking again. Elara caught up to him, heart pounding. "You can't break their laws for me. You just got your throne back." "I didn't get anything back," Kaelin interrupted. "I haven't even reached Thornhall yet, and when I do, I'm going to walk in there with you beside me, because you're the reason I'm alive. If they can't accept that, they can find another king." "That's insane." "Probably." "You're going to start a civil war over this." "Maybe. Or maybe I'm going to teach them that the old ways need to change." He looked at her sidelong, and there was something fierce and reckless in his expression that made her pulse kick. "You saved my life when I was powerless," he said. "You burned your hands breaking a curse no one else would touch. You stood between me and an army and lied to a killer's face to buy me time. If that doesn't earn you a place in my hall, then my hall isn't worth keeping." Elara didn't know what to say to that, so she just kept walking. They crossed into the thornwood at midday. The forest was everything the stories promised, and worse. Trees so tall their tops disappeared into mist, roots like gnarled fists breaking through frozen ground, shadows that moved when you weren't looking. The temperature dropped 20 degrees the moment they passed the tree line, and the wolves shifted uneasily, scanning the undergrowth. "Why are they nervous?" Elara asked. "The thornwood doesn't belong to us," Kaelin said. "It's older than the clans, older than the shift. There are things here that remember when wolves were just animals." "What kind of things?" "The kind you don't talk about unless you want their attention." They moved faster after that. The path wound through the forest like a scar, narrow and treacherous, marked with stones carved in symbols Elara didn't recognize. Kaelin navigated it from memory, never hesitating, and she realized he must have walked this route 1,000 times before the curse took him. Night fell fast in the thornwood. One moment the sky was gray, the next it was black, and the temperature plummeted. They made camp in a clearing ringed with standing stones, built fires that burned too bright and too hot, and posted guards at every compass point. Elara sat close to one of the fires, trying to stop shivering, while Kaelin spoke quietly with Gareth and the other senior wolves. She caught fragments of the conversation, supply routes, garrison numbers, names of clan leaders she didn't know, but most of it washed over her. She was so far outside her world now she couldn't even see the edges. A young wolf approached the fire, maybe 18, with nervous eyes and a half-healed scar across his jaw. He shifted into human form and sat down across from her, hands held toward the flames. "You're the one who freed him," the boy said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "How?" "I broke the collar." But it was cursed, blood-forged, unbreakable. "Nothing's unbreakable," Elara said quietly. "You just have to be willing to burn for it." The boy looked at her hands, still bandaged where the silver had seared them. "Does it hurt?" "Yes." "Was it worth it?" Elara glanced across the clearing to where Kalen stood, firelight catching the hard planes of his face, and thought about the wolf who'd waited outside the mill every day, who'd looked at her like she mattered. "Yes," she said. The boy nodded slowly. "My name's Rowan. I was in the southern garrison when Darius took over. I didn't fight for him. I didn't fight against him either. I just survived. That's more than most people manage." "I wanted to tell you—" He hesitated. "A lot of us are glad Kalen's back. We didn't believe Darius when he said the king was dead. It didn't feel right, and now maybe things can go back to how they were." "Things never go back," Elara said. "They just go forward." Rowan considered this, then stood. "I'll take second watch tonight. If you need anything, just call." He shifted and loped off into the darkness. Elara sat alone by the fire until Kalen finished his conversation and came to sit beside her. "You should sleep," he said. "Can't. Too cold. Too wired." "Here." He pulled off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. It was massive, heavy with fur and warmth, and it smelled like him, smoke and pine, and something wild she couldn't name. "You'll freeze," she protested. "I run hot. Shifter thing." He stretched out beside the fire, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, and stared up at the canopy where stars glinted through gaps in the branches. "Tell me about your brother," he said quietly. The question caught her off guard. "Why?" "Because you never talk about him. But I can see him in you, the way you fight, the way you refuse to quit. He's part of why you saved me." Elara was silent for a long time. Then she started talking. She told him about Matthias, about the way he'd raised her after their parents died, about his terrible jokes and his skill with a rifle, about the morning he'd left for the Thornwood and never came back. She told him about the search parties that found nothing, the rumors that he'd been taken by wolves, the slow, horrible process of accepting that he was gone. "I kept thinking I'd see him again," she said, "that he'd walk through the door one day with some crazy story about getting lost or injured or captured by bandits. I thought if I just waited long enough, he'd come home." "Did you ever find out what happened?" "No, the forest doesn't give back its dead." Kalen sat up slowly. "What did he look like? Why does that matter? Just tell me." Elara closed her eyes, pulling up the memory. Tall, lean, dark hair, gray eyes, scar on his left hand from a hunting accident when he was 16. Kalen went very still. "When did he disappear?" 6 years ago, late autumn. Why?" He didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. 6 years ago, I was hunting with my border patrol near the southern edge of the Thornwood. We found a human who'd crossed the boundary stones, half dead from cold and blood loss. He'd been attacked by something, not a wolf, something else. We tried to save him, but he died before we could get him back to Thornhall." Elara's heart stopped. "What did you do with the body?" "We gave him to the forest. It's the law. Humans who die in our territory go back to the earth." "Did he have anything with him? Any identification?" Kalen reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and tarnished. A hunting medallion. Elara took it with shaking hands, turned it over, and felt the world tilt. Engraved on the back, barely visible, were 2 letters. M.V. Matthias Vance. "I'm sorry," Kalen said quietly. "I didn't know he was your brother. I didn't know—" Elara couldn't hear him, couldn't hear anything over the roaring in her ears. She'd spent 6 years not knowing, 6 years carrying the weight of Matthias's absence, and all along he died within miles of where she stood, died trying to make it home. He was alone, she whispered. He wasn't afraid. When I found him, he told me to tell his sister he tried, that he fought, that he was sorry he couldn't make it back. The tears came before she could stop them, hot and fast, 6 years of grief breaking open like a wound. Kaelin pulled her against his chest and let her cry. She didn't know how long she wept, minutes, hours. But when she finally stopped, when the tears ran dry and her breathing steadied, she felt something shift inside her. Not closure, resolution. "Thank you," she said hoarsely. "For what?" "For trying to save him, for remembering." Kaelin's arms tightened around her. "I won't let you die alone," he said. "I swear it." And despite everything, the cold, the danger, the impossible situation they were walking into, Elara believed him. They reached Thornhall on the evening of the 3rd day. The fortress rose from the mountainside like a living thing, all stone and iron and ancient power. It was built into the cliff face, towers reaching toward the sky, walls carved with murals of wolves and stars, and battles lost to time. Fires burned in iron braziers along the ramparts, and the gates were massive slabs of oak reinforced with steel. The wolves stopped at the base of the approach road, waiting. Kaelin stood at the front, hands loose at his sides, and looked up at the home he'd been torn from. "Last chance to turn back," he said to Elara. "Not a chance." He smiled grimly. "Then let's see if they remember me." He started up the road. The gates didn't open. They walked the entire length of the approach, 1/2 mile of switchbacks and stairs carved into the mountain, and the gates remained shut. When they reached the top, Kaelin stopped in front of the iron-bound doors and slammed his fist against them 3 times. The sound echoed like thunder. Silence. Then a voice called down from the ramparts. "State your business." "Open the gates," Kaelin called back. "Your king has returned." Laughter rang out from the walls. "The king is dead." "I'm standing right here. Darius Thorn sits the throne. If you've got business, take it up with him." "Darius is in exile. I beat him in open challenge in Greyhaven 3 days ago. Now open the damned gates before I tear them off their hinges." More laughter, but this time uncertain. A different voice spoke, older, sharper. "Prove you are who you claim." Kaelin looked at Gareth. The old wolf stepped forward and shouted up at the walls. "I am Gareth Stoneeye, first blade of the northern clans. I witnessed the challenge. Kaelin Thorn lives and rules by right of blood and dominance. Open the gates or face him in trial." The silence stretched. Then slowly the gates began to swing open. Beyond them, a courtyard stretched wide and empty except for a single figure standing at the center. A woman. She was tall, white-haired, dressed in robes the color of storm clouds. Her eyes were milky with age, but they fixed on Kaelin with unnerving accuracy. "The seer," Kaelin murmured. He walked forward. Elara followed. The old woman didn't move until they were standing directly in front of her. Then she reached out with one gnarled hand and pressed it against Kaelin's chest, right over his heart. "You are real," she said softly. "The forest gave you back." The forest had help. The seer's blind eyes shifted to Elara. The human, the one who broke the chains. "Her name is Elara. I know her name. I've seen it written in fire and blood. She will burn this kingdom down or raise it higher than it's ever been. Perhaps both." "I don't understand," Elara said. The seer smiled. "You will." She turned and gestured toward the inner keep. "The council waits. They demand proof." "I'll give it to them," Kaelin said. They crossed the courtyard and entered the great hall. It was vast, vaulted ceilings, pillars carved with wolf motifs, walls lined with weapons and banners from 100 clans. At the far end, raised on a dais, sat a throne made of black stone and silver, empty. Around the room, arranged in a semicircle, stood the clan leaders, 20 men and women, all shifters, all radiating power and hostility. At the center stood a man with iron-gray hair and a face like carved granite. "I am Corvin Ashmark," he said coldly, "speaker for the council. You claim to be Kaelin Thorn." "I don't claim, I am." "Then prove it. Submit to the trial by stone." Kaelin didn't hesitate. I accept. Murmurs rippled through the council. Corvin's expression didn't change. The human leaves. No, Kaelin said flatly. This is sacred law. The law answers to me. She stays. Corvin's eyes narrowed. If you fail the trial, you die, and we will not mourn you. Understood. The council parted, revealing a stone archway at the back of the hall. Kaelin took Elara's hand and walked toward it. The chamber beyond was small, circular, lit by a single shaft of moonlight falling through a gap in the ceiling. At the center sat a block of stone the size of a man's chest, surface covered in runes that glowed faintly silver. Place your hand on the stone, the seer said from the doorway. If you are true king, it will recognize your blood. If you are false, it will burn you to ash. Kaelin released Elara's hand and stepped forward. He placed his palm flat against the stone. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the runes exploded with light, white, blinding, pure. It filled the chamber, filled the hall, poured out through the windows and into the night sky. The stone beneath Kaelin's hand cracked, broke, reformed into something new, a crown of black stone and silver, burning with inner fire. The light faded. Kaelin stood holding the crown, breathing hard, alive. The council dropped to one knee. Corvin's voice was rough with emotion. Hail Kaelin Thorn, the true king returns. The hall erupted in sound, cheers, howls, the thunder of fists on stone. Elara felt tears on her face and didn't care. Kaelin turned to her, crown in hand, and smiled. Still think I should have turned back? Shut up and put on the crown. He laughed, the first real laugh she'd heard from him, and placed the crown on his head. It fit perfectly. The king had come home, and the woman who saved him stood beside his throne. The crown sat heavy on Kaelin's head, but his shoulders didn't bow. He stood at the center of the great hall while the clan leaders rose from their knees and Elara watched something fundamental shift in the room. These were not people who gave respect easily. They were warriors, survivors, alphas in their own right, who'd spent 3 years following a usurper because the alternative was civil war. But now they looked at Kaelin like they were seeing him for the first time, not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as the king who'd clawed his way back from the grave. The firelight danced across the vaulted ceiling, casting shadows that moved like living things. The air smelled of smoke and stone and something older, the accumulated weight of centuries of rule, of decisions made in this hall that had shaped the fate of the northern clans. Elara could feel it pressing down on her, a physical presence that made her skin prickle. Corvin Ashmark stepped forward, his granite face unreadable. The stone has spoken, he said, voice carrying to every corner of the hall. Kaelin Thorn is our rightful king, but a king without a kingdom is just a man with a crown. We need more than proof of blood. We need proof of vision. Kaelin met his gaze steadily. What are you asking? 3 years under Darius's rule changed things. He made alliances you wouldn't have made, broke treaties you wouldn't have broken. The clans are fractured. The eastern territories are on the edge of rebellion. The southern border is hemorrhaging people to the human cities because they don't trust us to protect them anymore. Corvin's expression hardened. The northern outposts have been abandoned. The western trade routes are controlled by bandits. Our grain stores are at half capacity. And the council itself is split between those who supported Darius out of fear and those who simply gave up hope that you'd ever return. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. You want to rule? Tell us how you're going to fix what he destroyed. The hall went silent. Every eye turned to Kaelin. Elara felt her chest tighten. This was the real test. Not the stone, not the challenge in Greyhaven, but this moment where he had to prove he was more than just a fighter, that he could lead, that he understood what it meant to carry the weight of thousands of lives on his shoulders. Kaelin took a slow breath and stepped forward, crown catching the firelight like a halo of black fire and silver. Darius ruled through fear, he said quietly. He kept you in line by making you afraid of each other, afraid of the humans, afraid of what would happen if you questioned him. And fear works, for a while, but it doesn't build anything. It just tears things down slower, piece by piece, until you don't even recognize what you've become. He turned, addressing the entire room now, his voice gaining strength. I'm not going to rule like that. I'm not going to ask you to be afraid. I'm going to ask you to be brave. Brave enough to rebuild what we lost. Brave enough to change what doesn't work. And brave enough to admit that we can't survive alone anymore. Murmurs rippled through the council like wind through dry grass. A woman with silver-streaked red hair spoke up, voice sharp as a blade. You're talking about the humans. I'm talking about reality, Kaelin said. The human cities are growing. Their numbers are increasing. Their technology is advancing. In another generation, they'll outnumber us 10 to 1. We can either learn to coexist or we can go extinct fighting a war we can't win. The woman, Elara had heard someone call her Mara Redmane, bristled visibly. Darius said the same thing, and look where that got us. He made deals with human merchants, let them log our forests, mine our mountains, take our resources and give us scraps in return. He sold us out piece by piece while pretending it was diplomacy. That's not coexistence, Kaelin said flatly. That's surrender. What I'm proposing is different. We don't give them our land. We don't let them dictate terms. We negotiate from strength. We set boundaries, and we enforce them together. Humans and shifters working toward the same goal instead of bleeding each other dry over territory neither side can fully control. The humans will never agree to that, another clan leader said. A barrel-chested man with scars running down both arms like someone had tried to flay him alive. They see us as animals, monsters, things to be hunted and caged. They'll smile and shake our hands and then stab us in the back the moment we turn around. Some of them will, Kaelin agreed, just like some of us see them as prey, as weak, as something to be dominated or destroyed, but not all of them. There are humans who understand what we are, who respect the old laws, who know that we're stronger together than apart. He gestured to Elara. She's proof of that. Every head in the room swiveled toward her. Elara froze. She'd been trying to stay invisible, to blend into the shadows at the edge of the hall, but now she was standing in the full weight of their attention, and it felt like being crushed under a mountain. Dozens of eyes, all of them glowing faintly in the firelight, all of them measuring her, judging her, finding her wanting. Mara's eyes narrowed dangerously. A human has no place in this discussion. This is clan business. She has every place, Kaelin said, voice going cold and sharp as winter steel. She saved my life when none of you could. She broke a curse that your best healers and seers said was unbreakable. She stood between me and an army when she had nothing to gain and everything to lose. If that doesn't earn her a voice in this hall, then we've already lost everything that makes us worth saving. She's not one of us. She's my mate. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Silence crashed down so complete that Elara could hear her own heartbeat hammering in her ears, could hear the crackle of the fires in their braziers, could hear the wind howling outside the fortress walls. Then chaos. Voices erupted from every corner, some angry, some shocked, some disbelieving. Elara caught fragments through the roar of sound. Human mate is an abomination, dilutes the bloodline. Ancient law forbids. He's lost his mind. She probably enchanted him. This is what comes from spending 3 years as an animal. Kaelin slammed his fist on the nearest table, and the ancient oak cracked down the center with a sound like breaking bones. Splinters flew. The impact echoed like thunder. The hall went quiet. Ancient law, he said, voice low and dangerous as distant thunder. Also said that a cursed shifter couldn't reclaim his throne, that a broken collar couldn't be mended, that a king who lost his crown was dead in all but name. Every one of those laws was wrong. And if you want to cling to laws that don't serve us anymore, laws that make us weaker instead of stronger, then you're welcome to find another king. He pulled the crown from his head and held it out, firelight dancing across the black stone and silver inlay. Anyone want it? No one moved. No one spoke. No one even breathed. The crown gleamed in Kaelin's outstretched hand, and Elara realized what he was doing. He was forcing them to choose, to either accept his vision, including her, or to reject him entirely. No middle ground, no compromise. It was brilliant. It was terrifying. It was the kind of gamble that could end in civil war. Kaelin waited, crown gleaming in his outstretched hand, and the silence stretched until it became unbearable. until Elara thought someone would surely break, would surely step forward and take the crown and condemn them both. Finally, Corvin stepped forward, face unreadable as carved stone. Keep your crown, Kaelin, and keep your mate. But understand this. The clans will test her. They'll push her. They'll wait for her to fail. And when she does, they'll use it as proof that you were wrong, that humans don't belong in our world, that the old ways were right. Then they'll be waiting a long time, Kaelin said. He placed the crown back on his head and turned to Elara, offering his hand. You don't have to do this. You can leave right now. Go back to Greyhaven. Live your life. I won't hold it against you. I won't think less of you. This is going to be harder than anything you've ever done. They're going to make you prove yourself every single day, and some of them will never accept you no matter what you do. Elara looked at him, at this impossible man who'd been a stray and a king and everything in between, and felt something fierce and certain bloom in her chest, hot as forge fire. She thought about the weeks she'd spent feeding him when she could barely feed herself. The nights he'd kept watch over her tiny apartment, the moment she'd grabbed a burning collar and ripped it free because she couldn't watch him die. She'd made her choice then. Everything since had just been following it through. I didn't drag you out of the woods just to watch you do this alone, she said. They're going to make your life hell. They already did. I survived a textile mill that ground people into dust. I can survive this. A ghost of a smile crossed his scarred face. Then welcome to the throne, Elara Vance. Try not to let it kill you. She took his hand and felt the weight of a kingdom settle onto her shoulders like iron chains that somehow felt like wings. The council meeting lasted until dawn painted the eastern windows gold and crimson. They argued about everything, supply lines and border patrols, alliances with the western clans who'd stayed neutral during Darius's rule, trade agreements with human cities that might actually honor them. They argued about the grain stores that needed restocking before winter came, about the northern outposts that needed reinforcement, about the bandits on the western trade routes who were getting bolder every month. They argued about the humans most of all, which cities could be trusted, which needed to be watched, which were already planning to push into shifter territory the moment they sensed weakness. Elara sat through all of it, silent, absorbing every word like a sponge soaking up water. She didn't understand half the names or places they referenced, didn't know the histories behind the grudges that flared up like brush fires every few minutes. But she understood the underlying tension running through every conversation. These people were afraid of change, afraid of losing what little stability they'd clawed back from the chaos of Darius's rule, afraid that Kaelin's return meant another upheaval they couldn't survive. She took mental notes, committing names and faces to memory. Corvin Ashmark, the speaker, hard but fair, willing to listen to reason. Mara Redmayne, hostile but honest, who'd lost family to human hunters and would never fully trust them. Torrin Blackwood from the east, dangerous and calculating. A woman named Sarah Nightshade, who said little but watched everything with eyes like a hawk. An old man called Fenris Grey, who kept falling asleep during the duller parts of the discussion. Each one a piece of the puzzle she'd need to understand if she was going to survive here. When the meeting finally ended and the clan leaders dispersed to their quarters, some slamming doors, some muttering darkly, some simply too exhausted to care anymore, Kaelin slumped in the throne like someone had cut the strings holding him upright. That went well, he said dryly. Elara crossed the empty hall and sat on the stone steps below the throne, exhaustion making her bones feel like lead. Could it have gone worse? They could have tried to kill us. That's usually the sign things have gone truly badly. Give them time. I'm sure they're still considering it. Despite everything, he laughed. A short, rough sound that echoed in the empty hall. You know what being my mate actually means? I didn't explain it well before. There wasn't time. Not really. You mentioned something about souls and magic and pain. It was all a bit vague. Kaelin leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and the firelight caught the exhaustion written in every line of his face. It means our lives are bound. Literally. What hurts you hurts me. What threatens you threatens me. If you die, I'll feel it like losing half my soul. The pain of it will tear through me for the rest of my life. His voice went rough. And if I die, you'll carry that wound until the day you follow me. It's not romantic. It's not fair. It's just how the magic works. It's the price of the bond. Elara thought about the moment the collar broke. The explosion of light that had thrown her across the room, the way she'd felt something inside her shift and lock into place, like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known existed. "I felt it," she said quietly. "When you transformed back, when you took the crown. I felt it like it was happening to me. Your pain, your relief, your fear. It was. That's the bond. It connects us in ways I don't fully understand. The old texts say bonded mates can feel each other's emotions, share strength when one is weak, sometimes even communicate without words." He paused. "It's rare. Most shifters never find their true mate. I thought I never would. Thought I'd rule alone until the day I died. And you're okay with it being me? A human you barely know?" "I didn't choose this any more than you did. The bond chose us. The magic recognized what you did for me, saw me when I was nothing, chose me when I was powerless, and decided we belonged together." He met her eyes. "I could fight it. So could you. But it would be like fighting gravity, painful and pointless, and it would destroy us both in the end." "That's terrifying." "Yes. And you're honestly okay with it?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands, scarred, powerful hands that had killed and protected and broken a collar that should have been unbreakable. 3 years ago, I would have said no. I would have fought it with everything I had because I didn't want to need anyone. Needing people makes you vulnerable, gives them power over you, makes you weak. He looked up. "But I spent 3 years as a wolf, watching the world move on without me, unable to speak or fight or even tell people who I was. And the only thing that kept me sane was you. The way you looked at me like I mattered, the way you chose me even when it cost you everything, the way you fought for me when no one else would." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "So yes, I'm okay with it. More than okay. You gave me back my life, my crown, my future. And if the price is binding my soul to yours for the rest of our days, then I'll pay it gladly." Elara felt heat rise in her face, her chest tight with emotions she didn't have names for. "I don't know how to be a queen. Neither did I when I became king. You learn as you go, make mistakes, try again, fail better next time. What if I'm terrible at it? What if I make everything worse? Then you'll be terrible at it together with me, and we'll figure it out." Despite everything, the exhaustion, the fear, the crushing weight of responsibility, she smiled. "That's not reassuring. It's honest." A voice interrupted from the doorway, sharp and urgent. "Your Majesty." Gareth stood at the entrance to the hall, face grim as winter stone, snow still dusting his shoulders. "We have a problem." Quote. The problem arrived at noon the next day, riding through the gates on horses that steamed in the cold mountain air. A delegation from the Eastern Territories, 5 clan leaders, all of them hard-eyed and heavily armed, demanding an audience with the king. Kaelin met them in the council chamber, Gareth at his right hand, Elara at his left. The leader of the delegation was a man named Torrin Blackwood, massive even by shifter standards, with shoulders like a bull and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite with a dull axe. Scars ran down one side of his neck, disappearing beneath his fur-lined collar. His eyes were pale gray, cold as winter ice. "We heard the rumors," Torrin said without preamble, his voice like gravel scraping against stone, "that Kaelin Thorne was alive, that he'd taken back the throne, that the stone accepted him. We came to see if it was true or just another story desperate people tell themselves." "It's true," Kaelin said evenly. "Prove it." "I already did. The stone accepted me. The council confirmed it. What more do you need?" "A demonstration." Torrin's smile was cold as midwinter ice. "Darius kept the Eastern clans in line through strength. We respected him because he was stronger than any of us. Meaner. More willing to do what needed doing. Show us you're stronger. I'm not fighting you to prove a point. Then you're weak. And we don't follow weak kings. We'll go back east, declare independence, and you can try to stop us if you've got the spine for it." The room went tense. Several of the Eastern clan leaders shifted their weight, hands moving toward weapons. Gareth's hand went to his belt. But Kaelin just stood there, utterly still, and the air seemed to thicken around him, pressure building like the moment before a storm breaks. "I beat Darius in open challenge in front of 50 witnesses," he said quietly. "I survived 3 years of a curse that should have killed me in 3 weeks. I walked through the thornwood, the forest that eats travelers alive and leaves nothing but bones, and took back my crown from a council that wanted me dead. If that's not strength, I don't know what is." "Words," Torin spat. "I want to see action." "Fine." Kaelin's eyes flashed gold, and for just a heartbeat, Elara saw the wolf beneath the human skin, all teeth and fury and ancient power barely contained. "You want action? Here's action. The Eastern Territories have been running wild since Darius took over, raiding human settlements, killing travelers on the road, burning farms and leaving children orphaned, breaking every treaty we ever made. That ends now. Today. You will pull back to the agreed boundaries. You will cease all unauthorized attacks, and you will submit quarterly reports to this council proving you're in compliance." Torin's face darkened like a thunderhead. "And if we refuse? Then I'll come east myself and drag you into compliance, by force if necessary. And I won't be gentle about it. I'll make an example that the clans will remember for 100 years. "You and what army?" Kaelin smiled, sharp and dangerous. "The one standing outside your hall right now. The one that followed me back from the grave because they believe in something more than just survival. The one that remembers what we used to be before fear made us small and mean and cruel. Before we forgot that strength without honor is just violence, that power without purpose is just tyranny." He leaned forward. "I don't need an army to deal with you, Torin. I just need to remind everyone what happens when you push me too far. Do you really want to find out?" Torin stared at him for a long beat, muscles coiled like a snake preparing to strike. The silence stretched. Then he laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound, but there was something almost like respect buried in it. "You've got spine, I'll give you that. More than I expected. More than Darius ever showed." He nodded slowly. "Fine. We'll comply, for now. But the moment you show weakness, the moment you prove you can't hold this kingdom together, we're done. The East will be ours, and you can try to take it back with that army of believers you're so proud of." "Understood. And Torin?" "What?" "If I have to come east, I'm bringing her with me." Kaelin gestured to Elara. "And she's meaner than I am." Torin's eyes slid to Elara, seeing her properly for the first time. "The human." "My mate," Kaelin corrected. "Is it true she broke the curse?" "Yes." Torin studied her with cold, calculating eyes, and Elara felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing pressing against her chest. "How?" Elara met his gaze steadily, refusing to flinch. "I grabbed the collar while it was burning and ripped it apart. It hurt like hell, but I'd do it again." "Why?" "Because he was worth saving." Torin's expression shifted slightly. Not quite approval, but something close to it. "You've got fire, human. Let's see if it's enough to keep you alive in a world that wants you dead." He turned and walked out, his delegation following. The door closed. Elara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "That was close." "That was a warning," Kaelin said. "They're going to test us. Both of us. And they're not going to stop until we prove we can handle whatever they throw at us. Or until we're dead. That too." The next 3 months were a blur of brutal, exhausting work that made the textile mill look like a vacation. Kaelin rebuilt the kingdom piece by piece, reinstating the old patrols, renegotiating treaties that Darius had broken or twisted beyond recognition, purging loyalists from key positions, and replacing them with people who might actually do the job instead of plotting rebellion. He worked from dawn until well past midnight, sleeping in snatches, eating when someone forced food in front of him. He was tireless, relentless, and utterly unwilling to compromise on the things that mattered. And Elara was beside him for all of it. She learned the politics of the clans, memorized the names and histories and generations-old grudges that went back so far no one even remembered what started them. She learned to read the subtle shifts in body language that meant someone was about to challenge Kaelin's authority. She learned when to speak and when to stay silent, when to push and when to yield, when to show strength and when to show mercy. She attended every council meeting, sat through endless negotiations, listened to disputes over territory and resources and honor that seemed trivial until she understood how much blood had been spilled over them. It was harder than anything she'd ever done. The mill had been brutal, yes, 12 hours of standing in the heat and noise, breathing dust and lint until her lungs burned, watching people work themselves to death for wages that barely kept them alive. But it had been simple. Show up, do the work, go home, survive another day. The politics of Thornhall were infinitely more complex. Every conversation a chess game where the wrong word could start a war, where every decision had consequences that rippled out for months or years. And the clan leaders tested her constantly. They questioned her decisions, mocked her ignorance of shifter customs, made jokes about humans that cut like knives, watching to see if she'd break, if she'd cry, if she'd run back to whatever hole she'd crawled out of. She didn't break. When Mara challenged her knowledge of border law during a council meeting, implying that a human couldn't possibly understand the complexities of territorial agreements that had been negotiated over centuries, Elara spent 3 days locked in the library reading every treaty and precedent she could find. The texts were written in archaic language, some of them in dialects she could barely decipher, but she pushed through. Then she walked into the next meeting and recited them from memory, chapter and verse, including the amendments and exceptions and special cases, until Mara's face went red and she had nothing left to say. When Corvin implied she was too weak to survive a northern winter, too soft for the harsh realities of mountain life where the cold could kill you in minutes if you made one wrong step, Elara volunteered for a week-long patrol through the worst blizzard in a decade. The patrol was supposed to check the northern outposts, make sure they were adequately supplied and manned. But the storm hit on the second day. Wind like knives, snow so thick you couldn't see 3 feet ahead, temperature dropping so low that exposed skin froze in seconds. Half the patrol wanted to turn back. Elara kept going. She came back frostbitten, exhausted, barely able to stand, 2 of her fingers turning black from cold damage. The healer said she'd been hours away from losing them, but she'd completed the patrol, checked every outpost, delivered the supplies. Corvin never mentioned her weakness again. When Torrin sent word from the east that his clans wouldn't accept orders from a human, that she had no authority over shifter territory and no right to dictate policy, Elara rode east herself with a single guard, young Rowan, who'd volunteered immediately despite the danger. The journey took 5 days through territory that grew increasingly hostile. They were shadowed by Eastern clan scouts, watched from the tree line, their camp surrounded every night by wolves who didn't attack but made it clear they could. When they reached Torrin's hall, he made them wait outside in the cold for 3 hours before granting an audience. Elara sat across from him for 6 hours, matching him point for point, never backing down, never showing fear. She negotiated a compromise that gave the Eastern clans more autonomy in local matters while keeping them bound to the Crown's authority on issues of war, trade, and justice. It wasn't perfect, but it was workable. And when she rode back to Thornhall, Torrin sent a message with her. The human has teeth, I respect that. Slowly, grudgingly, like ice melting in late spring, the clans began to respect her. Not because she was Kaelin's mate, not because the bond made her special, because she earned it with blood and sweat and absolute refusal to quit. But respect wasn't the same as acceptance. There were still whispers in the corridors, still looks that said she didn't belong. Still moments when she walked into a room and conversation stopped dead, everyone staring at the human who thought she could be queen. The worst came from a clan leader named Marcus Ironhide, who'd supported Darius and made no secret of his contempt for Kaelin's soft policies. He cornered Elara in the library one evening when she was alone, researching trade routes. "You don't belong here," he said flatly. "The king says otherwise." "The king is compromised. The bond has made him weak. He sees you through magic-tinted eyes, not reality." "If I'm so weak, why do you care?" "Because you're going to get people killed. Your ignorance, your human sentimentality, your complete lack of understanding of what we are. It's going to lead to decisions that cost shifter lives. And I won't stand by and watch it happen." Elara closed the book she'd been reading and stood. "You're right about one thing. I don't understand what it's like to be a shifter. I don't know what it feels like to transform, to hunt, to have that kind of power. But I know what it's like to be powerless, to be invisible, to watch the world grind people into dust and not care. And I know that if you keep treating humans like the enemy, You're going to create the very war you're trying to avoid. Humans are the enemy. Some of them. Just like some shifters or tyrants who use strength as an excuse for cruelty. But not all of them. And until you figure that out, you're going to keep bleeding people to the cities, keep losing territory, keep dying slowly, instead of building something that lasts. Marcus's face darkened. You think you're so wise. You've been here 3 months, and you think you understand us. I don't understand you, but I'm trying, which is more than you're doing. He stepped closer, and she could smell the aggression rolling off him in waves. Be careful, human. Accidents happen in the mountains. People disappear. The cold claims them. Wild animals, rock slides, so many ways to die. Is that a threat? It's a warning. From someone who's seen too many good people die because their leaders made stupid choices. He left. Elara sat back down, hands shaking, and tried to focus on the trade routes. But the words echoed in her mind for days. Bochet. She told Kaelin about it that night. They were in the royal chambers, a suite of rooms in the highest tower, with windows that looked out over the valley below. The rooms were sparse, functional, not nearly as grand as Elara had expected. A bed, a desk, a fireplace, shelves of books. Kaelin was at the desk, reviewing patrol reports, when she told him. He went very still. What did you say? He threatened me, or warned me, I'm not sure which. What exactly did he say? She repeated the conversation word for word. Kaelin's eyes flashed gold. I'll kill him. No. He threatened you. He's testing me. If you kill him, it proves I'm weak, that I need you to fight my battles. It'll undermine everything I've been trying to build. I don't care. I do. She crossed the room and took his hands, forcing him to look at her. Listen to me. I know you want to protect me. I feel it through the bond, this constant need to keep me safe. But if you fight this battle for me, I lose. The clans will never respect me. They'll see me as your weakness, your liability, and eventually they'll use me against you. So what do you want me to do? Nothing? I want you to trust me to handle it. How? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. He pulled her close, and she felt his heart hammering against her chest, felt the rage and fear and frustration pouring through the bond. If he touches you, he won't. He's too smart for that. He wants me to fail on my own, to prove his point without getting his hands dirty. And you're going to prove him wrong. That's the plan. Kaelin laughed, rough and bitter. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most reckless. Can't I be both? The opportunity came 2 weeks later. A dispute erupted between two clans over hunting territory in the western woods. It was the kind of thing that should have been settled quickly. Simple boundary disagreement happens all the time. But one of the clans was led by Marcus Ironhide, and he refused to negotiate. The council met to discuss it, and Marcus made his position clear. The western woods have belonged to Clan Ironhide for 3 generations. Clan Swiftwater is trying to encroach on territory that isn't theirs. I won't yield. The Swiftwater representative, a young woman named Kira, argued back. The woods have always been shared hunting grounds. Your clan has been pushing deeper, claiming more and more territory, driving our hunters out. It's not sustainable. Then hunt somewhere else. There is nowhere else. You've taken it all. The argument went in circles for an hour, neither side budging, until Corvin called for a vote. The council was split. Kaelin could have broken the tie, but instead he looked at Elara. What do you think? The room went silent. All eyes turned to her. Marcus's expression said this was a trap, that whatever she decided would be wrong. Elara stood slowly. I think this isn't about hunting territory. It's about power. About who gets to decide how resources are shared. And if we let power be the only thing that matters, we're no better than animals. We are animals, Marcus said. No, you're people who can become animals. There's a difference. She turned to address the whole council. The western woods are large enough for both clans to hunt sustainably if you actually coordinate. Set up a rotation. Mark boundaries that change seasonally based on game migration. Have joint hunts for the larger prey that require more hunters anyway. Kira looked thoughtful. Marcus looked skeptical. And who enforces this rotation? Who makes sure both sides follow the rules? I will. Elara said. You? Me. I'll go to the western woods, I'll survey the territory, I'll meet with hunters from both clans and work out a system that's fair, and I'll check in quarterly to make sure it's working. You don't know anything about hunting? Then I'll learn. That's what I've been doing since I got here, learning, and I'm getting pretty good at it. Marcus's smile was cold. The western woods are dangerous, full of rock slides, winter predators, terrain that will kill you if you don't know what you're doing. You really think you can handle it? I survived your blizzard patrol. I can survive your woods. That was luck. Then I'll get lucky again. The council voted. Elara's proposal passed by a narrow margin. Marcus's face was unreadable, but as the meeting broke up, he approached her. I hope you know what you're doing, human. The woods don't care about good intentions. Neither do I. I care about results. Elara left for the western woods 3 days later with a small team, Rowan, a tracker named Senna, who knew the territory, and surprisingly, Mara Redmayne. I'm not here to help you, Mara said flatly as they rode out. I'm here to make sure you don't die and start a war. I appreciate your honesty. Don't. I still think you're a mistake, but I'm willing to be proven wrong. The western woods were beautiful and deadly. Ancient pines rose like cathedral pillars, their branches so thick they blocked out the sun in places. The ground was a maze of roots and rocks, streams cutting through narrow ravines, cliffs dropping away into nothing. They spent 2 weeks surveying the territory, mapping hunting grounds, talking to hunters from both clans. The work was exhausting. They hiked from dawn until dark, slept in rough camps, ate whatever they could catch or forage. Elara's feet blistered. Her legs ached. She fell into freezing streams twice and learned exactly how fast you needed to move to avoid hypothermia. But she also learned. She learned to read game trails, to identify which areas had been overhunted and which were still rich with prey. She learned the seasonal migration patterns of the elk and deer. She learned which cliffs were stable and which would kill you if you trusted them. And she learned that the hunters, when you got them away from their clan leaders and their politics, just wanted to feed their families. They didn't care about power or territory. They cared about bringing home meat. By the end of 2 weeks, she'd drafted a rotation system that both sides agreed to. It wasn't perfect, but it was fair. On the last night, as they sat around the fire, Mara spoke up. I was wrong about you. Elara looked up, surprised. What? I said you were a mistake, that you'd get people killed. I was wrong. Mara poked at the fire with a stick. You're tougher than you look, and you actually listen. Most leaders just decide what they think is right and force everyone else to go along with it. You asked questions, you learned, you changed your plan based on what people told you. That's just common sense. No, it's wisdom, and it's rare. Senna nodded agreement. Even Rowan, who'd been supportive from the start, looked impressed. You're going to make a good queen, he said. Elara felt something warm bloom in her chest. Not pride exactly. Hope. They returned to Thornhall to find chaos. Darius had returned. He'd crossed the southern border 3 days earlier with an army, 50 shifters loyal to his cause, armed with silver weapons, backed by mercenaries from the southern human cities who fought for gold and cared nothing for politics. They'd hit the outer settlements first, burning farms, killing anyone who resisted. Now they were camped 15 miles south of Thornhall, and scouts reported they were preparing for a final assault. Kaelin was in the war room when Elara arrived, surrounded by maps and clan leaders arguing about strategy. He looked up when she entered, and relief flooded the bond. You're alive. Of course I'm alive. What's happening? Darius is back. He brought an army. We're preparing to meet him. When? Dawn tomorrow. He sent a message. He wants to settle this the old way. Champion combat. Him against me. Winner takes the throne. Elara's blood went cold. That's a trap. I know, but if I refuse, he'll use it as proof I'm weak, that I'm afraid of him, and the clans who are still on the fence will side with him. So what do? I fight him, and I win, or I die trying. No. Elara, there has to be another way. Kaelin pulled her aside, away from the others. There isn't. This was always going to happen. Darius won't stop. He can't. His entire identity is built on being the strong one, the one who does what needs doing. If he backs down now, he's nothing. And if you die, then you'll be queen. The council will follow you. I've made sure of it. I don't want to be queen without you. You won't have a choice. The bond between them flared hot with his fear and her rage and the terrible certainty that one of them might not survive the next day. The battle happened at dawn in the valley below Thornhall. Both armies assembled on opposite sides. Kaelin's forces outnumbered but holding the high ground. Darius's forces larger and better armed but exhausted from the march north. Kaelin and Darius met in the center, both in human form, both carrying silver blades. The rules were simple: fight until one yielded or died. Elara watched from the ridge with the other clan leaders, every muscle in her body screaming to run down there, to stop this, to do something. But Kaelin had made her promise to stay back. If I fall, he'd said that morning, you need to be alive to hold the kingdom together. Promise me. She'd promised. Now she regretted it with every fiber of her being. The fight began. Kaelin and Darius circled each other, blades flashing in the early light. They were evenly matched, both skilled, both strong, both carrying years of rage and betrayal. The first exchange was brutal. Darius struck high, Kaelin blocked and countered low. Steel rang against steel. They broke apart, circled again. Darius was faster, but Kaelin was smarter. He let Darius attack, conserving energy, learning his patterns. Then he started to press, driving Darius back step by step. Blood appeared on Darius's shoulder, then his thigh, then his side. But Darius fought like a man with nothing to lose. He got inside Kaelin's guard and drove his blade into Kaelin's ribs. Elara screamed. She felt the pain through the bond. Sharp, white-hot, stealing breath. Kaelin staggered, but didn't fall. He grabbed Darius's wrist, twisted, broke it with a crack that echoed across the valley. Darius howled and dropped his blade. Kaelin kicked it away and leveled his own sword at Darius's throat. Yield! Darius's eyes blazed with hatred. Never. Then die. Kaelin raised the blade and stopped. Elara felt his hesitation through the bond, the war between justice and mercy, between what the old laws demanded and what kind of king he wanted to be. No, Kaelin said quietly. I'm not giving you martyrdom. I'm not making you a symbol your followers can rally around. He lowered the blade. You have 1 hour to get your army off our lands. After that, anyone still here dies. You get exile. Again. But this time, if I hear even a rumor that you're planning another attack, I won't fight you in single combat. I'll hunt you down like the animal you pretend not to be. He turned and walked away. Darius's forces broke and ran. The battle was over. Kaelin collapsed the moment he reached the ridge. Healers swarmed him, and Elara shoved through them, dropping to her knees beside him. You idiot, she gasped. You complete idiot. You could have died. But I didn't. You're bleeding. I know. Hurts like hell. Worth it, though. How is this worth it? Because I proved mercy isn't weakness. Because I showed them we can be better than what we were. Because... He coughed, blood flecking his lips. Because you were right. Building is harder than burning, but it's worth doing. The healers stabilized him, got him back to Thornhall, spent 3 days putting him back together. Elara didn't leave his side. She slept in a chair beside his bed, ate when Gareth forced food on her, and generally refused to do anything except wait for him to wake up properly. When he finally did, 5 days later, his first words were, I told you I'd survive. Barely. Still counts. I'm still angry at you. I know. I can feel it. Good. He pulled her down beside him, and they lay there in silence, the bond humming between them, alive and whole and unbroken. Outside, the kingdom waited. But for now, this was enough. Thought. 2 years passed like water flowing over stone. Slow, steady, inevitable. The kingdom healed. Kaelin's mercy toward Darius became legend. The king who chose exile over execution, who proved strength through restraint rather than violence. Some clan leaders still disagreed with the decision, but even they had to admit it had worked. There were no more rebellions. The Eastern territories stayed in line, grudgingly but genuinely. The Western Woods dispute resolution became a model for other territorial disagreements. Trade routes opened between shifter lands and human cities that were willing to negotiate fairly. And Elara became the bridge that made it all possible. She negotiated treaties that protected both sides, built alliances that lasted, established networks of trust with human merchants and mayors who understood that shifters weren't monsters, just people trying to survive in a world that feared them. She traveled constantly, to human cities, to remote clan territories, to border outposts where shifters and humans were learning to coexist. It was exhausting. It was terrifying. It was the most meaningful work she'd ever done. The clans tested her less now. Most of them had come to respect her, even if they didn't fully understand her. She'd proven herself too many times to dismiss. Marcus Ironhide never apologized for his threats, but he stopped making them. And when a dispute arose in the northern territories that needed mediation, he specifically requested that Elara handle it. "You're fair," he said simply. "I don't like you, but I trust you to do what's right." It was the closest thing to approval she'd ever get from him. She'd take it. Mara became her closest advisor. The woman who'd hated her most now defended her most fiercely. "You proved me wrong," Mara said one evening over dinner. "I thought a human queen would destroy us. Instead, you're holding us together. I respect that. I respect you. Does this mean we're friends?" "Don't push it." But she smiled when she said it. The bond with Kaylin deepened in ways Elara couldn't have imagined. They could sense each other constantly now, not just emotions, but thoughts, intentions, sometimes even dreams. She'd wake in the night and know he was 3 halls away dealing with a crisis before anyone came to tell her. He'd turn in council meetings and meet her eyes, and entire conversations would happen in seconds. It should have been invasive. Instead, it felt like becoming more herself. Like she'd been half complete her whole life and only now was whole. And then, 3 years after she'd broken the collar that cursed him, Elara discovered she was pregnant. The pregnancy was complicated. Human carrying shifter children. It had happened before, but rarely, and the healers weren't sure what to expect. The first few months were rough. Exhaustion that felt like drowning, nausea that came in waves, and through it all the constant awareness that something was growing inside her that was fundamentally other. Kaylin was terrified. She could feel it through the bond. His fear that he'd lose her, that the pregnancy would kill her, that he'd have to choose between her and the child. "I'm not dying," she told him repeatedly. "You don't know that. I know I'm stronger than you think. I know I've survived everything else this kingdom has thrown at me. And I know I'm not leaving you alone with these clan leaders. They'd eat you alive without me." He laughed despite his fear. Probably true. The pregnancy progressed. Her body changed in ways that were both human and not. She craved raw meat, had senses that were sharper than normal, could hear heartbeats from across rooms. The healers said it was the babies influencing her through the bond. Babies. Plural. Twins. When they told her, Elara laughed until she cried. Of course it's twins, because one wolf child wouldn't be complicated enough. Kaylin looked like he might pass out. The birth happened on a spring morning, 4 years after Elara had first walked through Thornhall's gates. It was fast, brutal, and terrifying. But when it was over, when the healers placed 2 squirming, perfect babies in her arms, Elara felt something shift in the universe. A boy and a girl. Dark hair. Amber eyes. Already shifting between forms, unable to control it, flickering from human to wolf and back like candle flames. Kaylin wept, actual tears running down his scarred face as he held his children for the first time. "They're perfect," he whispered. "They're loud," Elara corrected as one of them started crying. That too. They named them Kael and Arya, and the kingdom celebrated for a week. Tawat. 5 years after Elara had dragged a dying wolf home from a Greyhaven shelter, she stood in the mountain gardens that cascaded down from Thornhall's southern walls. The gardens had been abandoned for decades, left to grow wild. Elara had spent the last 2 years restoring them with help from clan members who remembered what they'd once been. Now they bloomed in impossible colors: purple mountain primrose, white snow lilies, golden alpine forget-me-nots that covered the ground like scattered sunlight. 2 children raced through the flowers, laughing in voices that echoed off stone. Kael and Arya, barely 4 years old, shifting as they ran. Human to wolf to human again, with the thoughtless ease of children who'd never known any other way to be. Elara watched them play, heart so full it ached. Kaelin came up beside her, sliding an arm around her waist, and she leaned into his warmth. "They're going to hurt themselves," he observed as Kael tried to climb a tree in wolf form while Arya encouraged him from below. "Probably." "Should we stop them?" "No, let them learn. Pain teaches." "When did you get so wise?" "When I started listening to an old wolf who turned out to be a king." He laughed and pulled her closer. They stood together watching their children discover the world, and Elara thought about the impossible journey that had brought her here. A dying city, a broken millworker, a wolf with fire in his eyes, a silver collar that shouldn't have been breakable. Every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of terror and hope and desperate courage. All of it had led here. To this garden, this man, these children, this life she'd never dared to imagine. "Do you ever miss it?" Kaelin asked quietly. "Greyhaven, the life you had before." Elara thought about it seriously, about the cold apartment with cracked walls, the mill that had stolen pieces of her soul, the certainty that nothing would ever change, that she'd die the same way she'd lived, invisible, forgotten, ground to dust. "No," she said, "I don't miss it at all. I miss Matthias. Always. But everything else, I was drowning there. I just didn't know it until you gave me a reason to breathe. I think you have it backwards. You saved me. We saved each other. That's how it works." Kael came running up, still in wolf form, tongue lolling. He shifted to human, a small boy with scraped knees and leaves in his hair, and grabbed Kaelin's hand. "Papa, watch. I can climb all the way to the top now." "I saw. You're getting braver." "Just like you?" Something softened in Kaelin's expression. "Braver than me. You and your sister both." Arya appeared, dress torn from climbing, smile bright as stars. "Mama, tell us the story." "Which one?" "How you and Papa met." Elara glanced at Kaelin, who was trying not to smile. "You've heard it 100 times. It's our favorite," Kael insisted. They sat in the grass, Kaelin and Elara on a stone bench, the twins at their feet, and Elara began. "Once upon a time, in a city that had forgotten how to hope, there was a woman who worked in a factory that turned people into ghosts. And one winter morning, hunters brought a dying wolf to the shelter where she volunteered. He wore a collar that shouldn't exist and had eyes like fire. The children listened, rapt, even though they knew every word. When she reached the part about breaking the collar, Kael gasped like it was the first time. When she finished, Arya looked up with amber eyes so like her father's. "And they lived happily ever after?" Elara thought about the work still ahead. Treaties to maintain, borders to protect, a kingdom to hold together. About the fact that Darius was still alive somewhere, that threats would always exist, that peace was something you built day by day, not something you achieved once and kept forever. But she also thought about the man beside her, the children at her feet, the kingdom that was learning to be something new. "Yes," she said, "they lived happily ever after. Not perfectly, not easily, but happily." Because happiness wasn't the absence of struggle. It was the presence of purpose. It was fighting for something that mattered. It was choosing love over fear, mercy over vengeance, hope over despair. It was standing in a mountain garden with your family and knowing that every scar, every sacrifice, every impossible choice had been worth it. But years later, when travelers passed through Thornhall and asked about the human queen who ruled beside the Wolf King, they heard the same story. She was nobody, a mill worker from a dying city, a woman who dragged a dying stray home when she could barely feed herself, and that single act of compassion changed the fate of a kingdom. Because sometimes the bravest choice is simply choosing to love what others fear. Sometimes courage isn't grand gestures or heroic battles. Sometimes it's refusing to give up on someone when the world says they're worthless. And sometimes that's enough to change everything. The woman invisible in Greyhaven became unforgettable in Thornhall. The wolf left to die became the king who rebuilt a nation, and together they proved that the most powerful magic isn't found in ancient curses or sacred stones. It's found in the moment one person looks at another and says, "I choose you, I see you," And I will fight for you even when it costs everything. That's the magic that breaks curses. That's the magic that changes kingdoms. That's the magic that turns strays into kings and mill workers into queens. And that magic, once kindled, never dies.